Is this how the world is really run? You decide. On July 18, 2014 at 1:51 p.m., Archbishop wrote, I stand with the Universal Catholic Church founded by Christ. All the people whom you accuse of defrauding American citizens were elected by American citizens. That doesn't mean what they do is morally right, but the responsibility finally rests with the electorate. God bless you, Francis Cardinal George, Archbishop of Chicago. And I'm reading from AnnaVonReitz.com. She wrote the following response. It's 43 pages, but we'll read it in sections. And it tells the whole history of how we became this very corrupted organization called the United States. The following response. My dear Archbishop George, I too stand with the Universal Catholic Church founded by Christ. My blood seal stands upon the record of the Vatican Chancery Court in witness of what I am going to show you tonight. I am from a family that has served the Catholic Church since the First Holy Roman Empire, hereditary Grand Marshals of the Holy Roman Empire, Knights of the Holy Sepulchre. I have myself served as an international services agent and as a private attorney in service to His Holiness Pope Benedict the 16th and now Pope Francis. You must believe that I am in deadly earnest both about the seriousness of the criminality engulfing America and the danger this poses to the Church and to the rule of law. The canon law of the Church stands above every other form of law, the Roman Curia above all other courts. Even the Uniform Commercial Code, which was developed by the Curia as a just means to resolve the many international disputes and claims arising from the 1930 bankruptcy of the G5 nations, is copyrighted by Unidrite, a subsidiary of the Vatican. The organization which failed and which plunged America into this desperate criminality was originally chartered by the Church as a religious non-profit corporation. We, sir, are up to our ears in culpability for the circumstances herein discussed, and both the Pope Emeritus and Pope Francis have duly considered all the issues, and acting in the temporal capacities have rendered judgment as international trustees of the United States Trust 1789, recognizing the breach of trust and the criminality which has been practiced against the American states and the American state citizens. They have both taken strong action to begin addressing the circumstance. Pope Benedict XVI acted to create a new office in the Postal Service, establishing a regional postmaster for North America. Pope Francis has issued his first apostolic letter, the Motu Proprio, of July 11, 2013, rewriting the International Criminal Code as part of his continuing effort to address this situation, and has more recently addressed the United Nations and collapsed the worldwide derivatives market. This is not about any responsibility of the electorate. It is about the Church's responsibility to support the Pope in his role as the ultimate trustee of the global estate, to uphold the rule of law, and to make correction for a grave breach of trust that continued for 165 years and which has cost millions of innocent lives. We can only confess our sins, dear Cardinal, admitting as mere mortals our desperate need for grace and rising up each day to do what we can and must. I direct your attention to the Treaty of Paris, which ended the American Revolution, and the corollary Treaty of Versailles. There are 3 international trustees named as caretakers of the United States Trust 1789. They are the Pope in his temporal office, the British monarch, and the United States Postmaster, civil. Now I direct your attention to the Treaty of Westminster 1794, in which the city-state of Westminster and the Crown Temple pledged amity and perpetuity with the newly formed United States. Next, I direct your attention to the Treaty of Verona 1845, in which the then Pope and the British monarch, both trustees of the American National Trust, agreed that the representative form of government was incompatible with divine right of kings and with papal supremacy, and so both acted in secretive breach of trust. The British monarch issued letters of marque and reprisal to the members of the Bar Association, British Crown Commercial Company, which issued licenses to privateers to attack American vessels in international jurisdictions of the law. That, sir, is the genesis of the Bar Association licenses. A license, as you must know, is permission to engage in an act which would otherwise be illegal. The Americans responded by quickly passing an amendment to their Constitution, effectively barring attorneys from holding public office. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln, a bar attorney, was elected president of the United States Commercial Company, but could not lawfully act as the president of the United States of America Major. This is why representatives of 11 southern states refused to be seated and left the Congress adjourned sine die. In 1863, Lincoln was forced to bankrupt the original trust management company doing business as the United States. After years of bankruptcy reorganization, known euphemistically as Reconstruction, a new trust management organization was incorporated by the church, doing business as the United States of America Incorporated. This entity operated under the church auspices from the end of the Reconstruction to 1912, when the trust management organization was purchased by a consortium of banks doing business as the Federal Reserve. By 1913, they had pushed through the Federal Reserve Act, and via legal tender laws began a purposeful agenda to devalue the American dollar and bankrupt the original corporation doing business as the United States of America Incorporated. In May of 1930, the G5 nations declared international bankruptcy via joint treaty entered into at the Geneva Conventions. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the representative of the Federal Reserve doing business as United States of America Incorporated. 3 years later, having been elected president, he declared domestic bankruptcy as well. One of his first acts was to illegally confiscate privately held American gold, which was never repaid. As the United States of America Incorporated was being prepared for bankruptcy, agents throughout the Congress and the individual states of the Union rushed through a process of registering franchises. They created states of states, merely named after the actual geographically defined American states. They also created foreign situs trusts, named after each and every living American. At the March 6, 1933 Conference of Governors meeting, the governors, merely corporate officers of franchises of the bankrupt United States of America Incorporated, pledged the good faith and credit of their states and the citizenry thereof to stand as sureties for the debts of the United States of America Incorporated during its bankruptcy reorganization. Imagine if Burger King International went bankrupt in the UK and it called all the local franchise owners together and they all agreed to name their customers as sureties for their corporate debts. That is what happened in America in 1933. The victims weren't told a word about this. The perpetrators were rewarded by the bankers with access to virtually unlimited credit, hypothecated against the assets of the American states and the private property of the American state citizens. All this credit cost the bankers nothing material, as they had inculcated a fiat money system. Issuing credit, money of account, cost them nothing but the time to enter digits in an account ledger. In exchange for this favor to the politicians, they were rewarded with legal tender laws allowing this system to exist in America and given surreptitious title to all real property assets in America and provided with protection for their activities by the members of the Bar Association. In 1944, FDR quitclaimed all the juicy service contracts and the assets used to service these governmental service contracts to the IMF. The IMF took over from the Federal Reserve, gaining control of every logo, name, title, department, and agency of the United States of America Incorporated, what Americans believed to be their government, right down to the flag. They chartered a new trust management organization in France, doing business as the all-capital United States Incorporated, and moved in. They also took over the state franchises and opened their own all-capital letters state of blank franchises. For the past 70 years, they have enslaved the people of America and plundered the assets of the United States Trust, 1789. The creditors who forced the bankruptcy of the United States of America Incorporated included the World Bank, the International Bank of Development and Reconstruction, and the Federal Reserve. But the priority creditors named in the 1934 Bankruptcy Act were the American states and the American state citizens. The banks, being aware of their own schemes, named the Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico to act as their chosen bankruptcy trustee. See Federal Title 5 for details. The Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico seized all the bogus states on paper and Americans on paper created by the Roosevelt administration and rolled all the assets presumed to be part of these trusts into Roman inferior trusts, STKV trusts, operated in the name of the Foreign Situs Trust Roosevelt created. Thus, a living man, denoted properly as all lowercase John Quincy Adams, was represented as a Foreign Situs Trust doing business as upper and lowercase John Quincy Adams, and then this entity was declared dead, presumed missing at sea, by the perpetrators of this massive identity theft scheme, and all the assets of John Quincy Adams were rolled over into a Roman inferior trust doing business as, all capital letters, John Quincy Adams. The Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico also removed all these Roman inferior trusts to Puerto Rico for safekeeping, where they came under the foreign jurisdiction of the Puerto Rican Commonwealth in the UK. There they were enslaved and taxed for the privilege of importing revenue to Puerto Rico, otherwise known as the income tax. All this was done in the name of winning World War II. The claims against the American assets supplied the credit to boot up the war industry effort, and seizing the estates of the Americans and redefining individual Americans as chattel belonging to their own estates, with all capital letters, allowed a means of conscripting millions of men into the armed services. After the war, nothing changed. The perpetrators never retooled American industry. They just went on pumping out armaments and selling arms and borrowing money against assets they never owned and enslaving the American people to the tune of Yankee Doodle Dandy. Over the years, the criminality of the arms dealers has become a terrible worldwide problem. They branched out from simply selling weapons and promoting war to selling drugs and running gambling and prostitution rings, booze and cigarettes, and every form of vice, violence, and viciousness. They also used their position of trust as the government to manipulate commodity and stock markets and control natural resources belonging to the American people for private gain. And the church is culpable because at the broader base, the church knew and did nothing. It continued to mindlessly operate on the directives established by the Treaty of Verona and never re-examined the disastrous consequences of all this for humanity, much less the hideous theft and abuse practiced upon the Americans. Incalculable amounts of labor siphoned off, incalculable material losses, and millions of lives lost or maimed in wars for profits. To that, you and your peers have turned a blind eye and shrugged and said, "It's the responsibility of the voters," the same voters who have been purposefully misled and self-interestedly abused, kept in the dark, manipulated, defrauded, and robbed by their employees and those they trust to act in their behalf, by the Supreme Pontiff who is obligated by solemn treaty to act as their trustee. It is with good reason that the higher administrators of the church have been reluctant to expose the criminality or deal with it, for fear that the church would be blamed. However, by 2009, the church was being blamed effectively and determinedly until it was finally brought before Pope Benedict XVI, who accepted responsibility, who exercised his temporal powers, and began dealing with the corruption. Pope Francis has brought the vitality and vigor and insight needed to the office and is continuing to bring remedy. Meanwhile, the bankruptcy of the United States of America Incorporated has finally been ended. The old Federal Reserve System is no more, but a new version of all caps Federal Reserve has been organized under United Nations, all caps, auspices, and has tried to mount a new round of the same old game in collusion with the IMF. It's a funny thing about a debt credit monetary system. When you create debt for one party, you unavoidably create a debt for another. So when people talk about the national debt being $13 or $21 or however many trillion dollars, that means that somewhere someone or something has been credited with that amount of money. Exactly who and what came to the surface in July of 2011, we have the UCC filings on file. The perpetrators rolled the credit side of the national debt over into the United States Department of the Treasury and used it to back a new species of fiat debt note called U.S. Treasury notes in all capital letters. They have attempted, in other words, to initiate another round of the same old scam. There is little doubt that it was the intention of the two colluding banking cartels, the Federal Reserve and the IMF, to simply reverse positions, bankrupt the United States, all capital letters, United States Incorporated, all capital letters, leaving the Roman inferior trusts named after the Americans to stand as sureties for the debts of the insolvent, all caps, United States Incorporated, during another nice long bankruptcy reorganization. Intervention by Pope Benedict XVI and Pope Francis, both together with ever-increasing public awareness of the situation and the fraud, has served to make what is euphemistically called revenue possible. In addition to the American state citizens waking up, the Russians and Chinese and other nations of the BRICS alliance woke up. As part of the fraud practiced against the Americans, Canadians, Australians, Japanese, and the populations of most of the countries of Western Europe, all bank accounts were converted to the ownership of the banks. As you know, if you didn't before, all bank accounts belonging to all caps John Quincy Public are in fact accounts belonging to a Puerto Rican estate trust owned and operated by the agencies of the IMF. This is how Christine Lagarde can speak so nonchalantly about seizing Americans' 401ks and savings and other retirement accounts. The IMF surreptitiously owns these accounts. The living Americans who innocently deposited their life savings into these accounts, thinking that they were their own private bank accounts, have been deceived and defrauded and presumed by the perpetrators to donate everything in those accounts to public trusts operated in their all caps names. Remember, I am an officer of the church too. I have taken a vow and placed the blood seal on the altar. This is not a joke. This is not a rehearsal. Take what you believe to be your checkbook out of your pocket and a strong magnifying glass and look at what appears to be the signature line. What do you see? It is not really a line, it is a row of microprint, endlessly repeating authorizing signature. Why would that verbiage have to be there, and why would it have to be obscured? To keep the victims from knowing the truth, that all their assets in banks have been unlawfully converted. You've already been told about the Puerto Rican estate trust, now witness the IRS scam. The living man, John Quincy Adams, is exempt by law from ever having to pay taxes, and by definition, income is profit accrued by corporations. It is literally impossible for any living American to owe income tax, yet millions upon millions of Americans are robbed, defrauded, harassed, and even imprisoned every year over income taxes. How is this possible? The all caps John Quincy Adams estate is a trust, a legal fiction entity, a corporation. Every dime that the living man, known as John Quincy Adams, unknowingly donates to the bank account belonging to the all caps John Quincy Adams estate is 100% profit for the Puerto Rican trust. And it just so happens that there is an excise tax for the privilege of importing revenue to Puerto Rico. The monster tax the poor devils for the privilege of giving them their money. And then people like Christine Lagarde sit around drinking champagne and callously discussing exactly how to finesse the seizures of the retirement accounts of millions of innocent American seniors. But there are worse things. Other elements among the criminals have taken out $1 million life insurance policies on every American man, woman, and child. They think they will simply murder a few $100 million of their creditors and collect on the life insurance policies. Have you ever heard of the all-seeing Cardinal George? I am the left hand of Amenhotep, and I will be obeyed in this matter, as will Pope Francis. There will be no seizure of the American retirement accounts, no false flags, no murder, no mayhem, no scalar weapons deployed. There will be no deceptive offers in commerce seeking to exchange gold for land or human capital under conditions of non-disclosure and deceit. There will be an end to this criminality and to the complacency of the church and to the American cardinals and archbishops responsible for the misadministration of the courts. or there will be hell on earth, Cardinal George, literally, and it will not come against innocent Americans. The left hand of God will come for those who are responsible and unrepentant. The Treaty of Verona is extinguished. All bar association licenses are extinguished. By order of Pope Francis, all attorneys, all clerks, every member of the judicial system operating these frauds and oppressions became 100% individually and commercially liable as of September 1st, 2013. The banking cartels and governmental services corporations have been given 3 years to clean up their acts from top to bottom, to come into compliance with the original equity contract owed to Americans, and to stop operating in criminal default. I suggest you get over your idea that this is the voters' responsibility. May God bless you to the same extent that you bless others. Anna Maria Wilhelmina Hanna Sophia Reitzinger von Reitzstein von Letlow. That's the first part.